Today, we bring you the American thriller horror movie Watch, and if you like then subscribe. The movie is adapted from the horror novel The Little Witch at the End of the World. The entire plot builds up to an unexpected climax that surprises everyone. Without further ado, let's begin the story. Eric and Andrew take their adopted daughter, Wynn, from the orphanage to an isolated cabin in the woods for a vacation. While Wynn is playing alone on the grass outside, a tall and strong man approaches her and greets her in a friendly manner. Wynn remembers her father's warning not to talk to strangers. However, the strong man assures her that they will soon become friends, so he won't be a stranger anymore. The man introduces himself as Da Juan, saying that when he was a child, he also used to catch grasshoppers like her. Wynn lets down her guard and starts talking about her two fathers. Although her family is different from others, Wynn feels happy to have two dads. At this moment, Da Juan hears a noise and looks into the distance. Following his gaze, Wynn sees three people carrying various tools approaching them. Da Juan tells Wynn that they are his colleagues and have come for a very important task. Realizing something is wrong, Wynn turns and heads back to the cabin. Da Juan doesn't chase after her but asks Wynn to tell her fathers not to resist and to let them into the house. Otherwise, they will have to break in by force. After entering the cabin, Wynn tells her fathers about the strangers outside carrying weapons. Just as she finished speaking, there is a knock on the door. Da Juan politely introduces himself and his companions, requesting to be let in for a face-to-face conversation. Eric politely declines, saying they don't want their vacation disturbed by outsiders and points out that they seem to be carrying weapons. Da Juan explains that those are not weapons but tools, and they have come to save a large number of people. Eric insists on calling the police, but the intruders reveal that they are aware of the remote location, where there is no cell signal. They have also cut the telephone lines. When the people outside receive no response from inside, they decide to force their way in by breaking the lock. Andrew claims he has a gun, but Eric quietly asks him and learns that the gun is in their truck outside. The intruders do not respond but instead start pounding on the door aggressively. Seeing this, Eric and Andrew push a sofa against the door and grab an iron rod, watching their surroundings nervously. As the intruders split up and surround the cabin, the three inside prepare to fight with all their strength. They decide to open the door and make a run for the truck outside to escape. At this moment, a woman holding a weapon was staring at them in a panic. Without hesitation, Eric raised his weapon and charged at her. They engaged in a fierce fight. Just as the woman fell to the ground, she seized the opportunity to trip Eric with her weapon, causing him to hit the back of his head on the floor. He immediately lost consciousness. The woman claimed to be a nurse and offered to help him, but Andrew waved an iron rod to keep her from approaching. Andrew was about to wake his partner when suddenly, a man broke through the window. A fierce struggle ensued between Andrew and the intruder, with Andrew landing several punches, leaving the man disoriented. However, at this moment, Da Juan and another accomplice broke through the door and surrounded them, holding Wynn in their arms. Andrew looked at their weapons and his unconscious partner on the ground and had no choice but to surrender. When Eric regained consciousness, he found himself and Andrew tied to chairs. The woman who had attacked him earlier was now tending to the wound on the back of his head. Da Juan sincerely assured them that they meant no harm and that before coming here, they didn't even know who Eric and Andrew were. He explained that the four of them were just ordinary people like anyone else. What happened next left Eric and Andrew utterly shocked. The four intruders stood in a row and began introducing themselves. The black woman introduced herself as Lena, a midwife nurse. 2 days ago, she had spent all her savings to travel from Southern California to this remote cabin just to speak with them. Da Juan introduced himself as a school teacher. The man with glasses, named Raymond, was a worker at a gas company. When it was the long-haired woman's turn to introduce herself, Eric interrupted, suspecting that they were part of a recruitment group. He questioned whether they belonged to some organization seeking new members and insisted that even if they were recruiting, there was no need for such drastic measures. However, the woman, appearing pressed for time, introduced herself as Adrian, a chef at a Mexican restaurant. Before she could finish, Da Juan urgently reminded everyone about the time. He solemnly stood before them and declared that the four of them had come to prevent the apocalypse. However, they needed Eric and Andrew's help to do so. Eric immediately lashed out, calling him crazy. Instead of getting angry, Da Juan knelt before them and earnestly pleaded for one of the three of them to willingly sacrifice themselves. They needed to kill that person to stop the apocalypse. If they refused to choose, the world would be destroyed, leaving only the three of them alive. Besides them, over 7 billion people on Earth would perish. Andrew argued that they had done nothing wrong, so why should they sacrifice their lives to bear such a responsibility? Da Juan explained that they could not decide who among the three should be sacrificed, nor could they take their own lives to fulfill the requirement. Andrew firmly responded that they would not choose anyone, even if it meant the end of the world. Seeing his unwavering stance, Raymond felt it was a complete waste of time, but Da Juan continued to persuade them. He explained that before coming here, the four of them had all seen the same visions of the world's destruction. That's how they found each other and came to this place. They did not know why they were chosen, but in their visions, a massive tsunami first submerged cities. Then, a deadly plague would spread across the globe. Next, the sky would collapse like shattered glass. Finally, the entire world would be plunged into eternal darkness. Once again, he asked them if they were willing to make a choice. If not, they would unleash a plague as punishment for humanity's sins. Seeing that Andrew and Eric remained indifferent, Dajwang stepped back, and Raymond stood in front of them holding a hoe. Just when Eric and Andrew thought he was about to attack, Adrian suddenly struck Win, who was behind Andrew. Andrew struggled desperately and shouted in rage, but Adrian returned Win to his arms. Raymond then knelt on the ground with a face full of pain and helplessness. He slowly took out a white cloth bag from his pocket and put it over his head. He told them not to close their eyes but to watch carefully. Eric was momentarily blinded by the sunlight behind him and kept telling himself it wasn't real. However, when he opened his eyes again, he saw the others raising their weapons and smashing them down on Raymond's head. Dajwang followed up with an axe to finish him off. Terrified, Win clung tightly to Andrew's neck, too scared to look at the horrifying scene. After the three intruders cleaned up the body and blood, Dajwang turned on the television. A breaking news report appeared, announcing a massive tsunami had struck the west coast of the United States. Dajwang claimed this disaster was caused by Raymond's sacrifice. However, Andrew still refused to believe it. Dajwang urged them to keep watching. The television showed a beach scene where people had been enjoying themselves just moments ago. Suddenly, a massive tsunami surged in from the distance. Tears welled up in the eyes of Dajwang and the others, as everything happened exactly as they had seen in their visions. On the screen, panicked people were running frantically along the beach. But towering waves, several stories high, engulfed everything in their path. Dajwang stated that they must make a decision by the next morning, either to sacrifice one person to save the world or to watch the apocalypse unfold. Andrew still refused to believe them, but Eric had already begun to waver. While changing Eric's bandages, Lena shared her own story. She admitted that she understood how they might all seem like religious fanatics, but in reality, she had never even been to a church. She was an atheist until the day she started experiencing visions. She traveled from her hometown to this place, seeing the same people and streets from her visions along the way. Meanwhile, Win followed Andrew's instructions and crawled out from under the wooded cabin, but the sound of the door alerted Dajwang, who quickly caught Win and brought him back. Andrew recalled an incident from 2 years ago when they had been in a bar fight, believing that the deceased Raymond was one of the people involved. Back then, Eric had been seriously injured, which led Andrew to take up boxing and carry a handgun for protection. He suspected that everything happening now was a setup, and Raymond had tricked Dajwang and the others. In response, Dajwang took out a photo of his students, explaining that he wanted their laughter to continue echoing in the world. That was his true purpose for being here. At that moment, Adrian stepped forward and recounted his horrifying visions, in which he held a child while being repeatedly burned to death in a fire. Even now, he could still hear the child's agonizing screams echoing in his ears. Despite this, Andrew kept urging Eric not to fall for their deception, calling them delusional and evil cultists. Seeing no other option, Adrian repeated Raymond's actions, kneeling down, putting a hood over his head, and being stabbed to death by Dajwang and Lena in front of Andrew and Eric. After cleaning up the body, they turned on the television once again. The news reported that a deadly plague targeting children had broken out in 3 countries, with infections rapidly increasing. Andrew insisted it was pre-recorded footage and not real. Just then, Win screamed to distract Dajwang, giving Andrew the chance to cut his ropes with a knife. Picking up a weapon from the ground, he pointed it at Dajwang and Lena. Andrew managed to free himself from the ropes and ran out of the cabin. Lena chased after him and tackled him to the ground, pleading with him not to run. Andrew grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it into her eyes, seizing the moment to escape to the car, where he frantically searched for his handgun. Lena hesitated, unwilling to hurt him but unsure how to stop him. Andrew loaded the gun and fired a shot into the air, causing Lena to panic and flee into the forest. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories.